Hey everyone, today on the plastic canvas we're painting Josh from Zombie 15. Hey everyone, Maddie from the Plastic Canvas and welcome to another Zombie 15 Survivor painting video. Just quickly, Zombie 15 is a 15-minute real-time co-op zombie survival board game. Really fast-paced, really frantic, lots of fun, where players are obviously against the clock, 15 minutes, trying to meet objectives, moving around the board while fighting the zombie horde. And so this here's one of our characters that you can play as, Josh. Got his bow and arrow. But one of the most important things with Zombie 15 is that because of how fast-paced the game is, players that are playing the game are really frantic. They need to be able to pick out which character they're controlling really fast. So each character has a really particular colour scheme to it. And Josh here is our orange character. So just quickly bring in his card. Doesn't actually have a super amount of orange actually in his outfit. You can just see a bit of orange in his shirt there. But yeah, so he's our orange one. And I don't actually have an orange paint. I didn't have one that came in my Reaper starter set that I bought, and I haven't bought any paint since I actually started. So I need to mix up some orange paint. I've got red and yellow, but I'm just awful at mixing up orange. I've done it a couple of times and it's just never right. And so that's why I've got a bit of tape on the base here. It's just like painter's tape. I don't have any of that like goop stuff to put on, but his base is already orange. And I thought if I just mask the base as much as I could, and you can see just there's a little spot down here beside his feet, just like there. You can see some of the orange coming through from the base. If I can cover as much of the base as possible, then in my painting I'll paint the base as little as possible, and then I can get away with painting as little of the base orange as possible. It's just one less spot that I need to paint orange. So yeah, he's just been primed with my brush on primer. Check out some of the earlier videos where I talk a bit about why I've used a brush-on primer so far. I think at least the Siphon video, I go into it a little bit there, but if you've been watching each of these, you know why, so I'm not going to go into that again there. So check out that if you want to know why I've used that, but that's the only thing I've done so far. So I'm going to get into base coating Josh. I've mentioned this each time. Figure I've done it every other video, why not this one as well? Because of the pace of the game, how quickly it's over, but also how quickly everyone's moving the minis around, they're not sitting there being looked at for an extended period of time. So I'm not going for a super high quality with any of these guys, just sort of barely a tabletop quality, just enough to do the job. But the most important thing is that colour really comes through. So I'm not worrying too much about all the little details that might sort of get in the way. Just trying to get that colour to come through. So yeah, so not going for too high of a standard, just enough so that they look the part out on the table, but you can tell quickly like which is Josh as opposed to which is Hazel, the pink character, who's just sitting there. So so just so that they're easily identifiable. So just for base coating, just as I've done in the other ones and I've mentioned, painting inside out. So starting with the lowest layer of the mini and then working up from there. And so I'm thinking back to things that I've already mentioned. I'm mindful of not repeating myself too much. But when I'm painting someone like a person, I just sort of imagine myself as the mini, as that character, and thinking about what order they would put all the different things on, so how they would get dressed, and then just sort of work up in that order, because that generally sort of helps with what layer goes over the top of another one. So always start with the skin because it's the lowest layer. So his shirt will be done after the skin, and part of the reason for that is that if some of the paint from his shirt happens to go onto his skin a little bit, because the shirt is supposed to go over his skin, it's not as noticeable as if some of the skin is coming back over the shirt, because that's not the way it's supposed to be. That's not the way that makes sense. So I always go back and touch up, but it's less touching up if you finish with a higher layer over a lower one, just purely because it doesn't stand out as much if you just get like a little bit of paint from one layer onto another, if it's supposed to be over it anyway. So yeah, so I'll be starting with the skin, then so his shorts will be done before his shirt, because his shirt finishes over the top of his shorts. So his quiver and bows there will probably be one of the last things to do, because they go over the top of everything else. So that's the basic sort of premise that I work with when working out what order to paint in, and that's worked for me. So yeah, so we're going to get into painting, and then we'll check back in as I've got things to share. Just a quick thing while I'm thinking of it, because there was a point there where I couldn't actually tell just from the mini if Josh had any gloves on his hand, and because I've got his card sitting there, it's easy to look up at it and just see that no, he doesn't, so I'm free to paint his hand. But it just made me think about back when I first started, and I didn't necessarily have really, really clear artwork. It's one good thing about painting these minis, even though they are very, very simple, there is really, really good artwork with the game to base all the colours off. But some of the games that I painted earlier on, I didn't have really clear artwork. And some of that is purely just thematic. So when I painted Spectre Ops, there's player cards with really, really cool artwork. But because that game's played inside, like thematically within the actual game itself, the characters are inside with low level light. The characters in the artwork were in heavy shadow. So there were certain points of the minis that were really, really hard to work out, whether it was like a skin tight, like lycra sort of suit, or whether it was skin, or even what color it should be. And I just found a really, really good starting point was just to go online, whether it was just Google Images or go to like someone's blog that's painted those minis before, and just have a look at what other people have done. Sometimes I found it a little bit hard to think of what colours to paint the minis, and the colours are so important. They can really sort of make and break whether your mini looks good or not. So that was the thing that definitely helped me, was just when I started painting a game, even if with the first few, even if I did have good artwork to work off, I still just jumped online, did a quick search, just typed in the name of the character in the board game into Google Images, and a bunch of images came up. And then I could sort of, even just from that, see, so, maybe going a light brown as opposed to a dark brown, that looks better for these various reasons, or they tried this effect here, maybe a bit of OSL or something like that, I might give that a bit of a go too. For lots of different reasons, it was a really, really good idea. So even if you do have clear artwork, I found for me it was good to go on and just have a look at what other people had done. But especially if I didn't have that clear artwork, I might have ended up going down my own road with what colours I chose, but just having a look at what other people did first just was a really, really good starting point. And so just while I was being able to just check back at the card there whether his hand had a glove on or not, it just reminded me of that. But yeah, so that was definitely something that was useful. just a quick thing, if you haven't actually gotten into the hobby yet and you're still sort of working out whether you want to or which paints you want to buy, and if one of the things that you're wondering is like how much paint to buy, when I first started, I bought a Reaper starter set that has 13 colours, I think. Yeah, about 13. Not one of the starter sets like the Learn to Paint kits that comes with the minis, just the core set, I think it's called. Master Series Paint starter paint set, that's it. And the reason I bought that over the Learn to Paint kits is that I just thought the colour range was better. Had a good red, blue, green, yellow, so on. To this point, and not for any real particular reason, I still haven't bought any other paints. I haven't had to, and I'm 6 months since I started, I haven't had to replace any yet because they've run out, and I haven't needed to buy any new ones. So I'm bringing this up because I'm about to paint his shorts, and they're a bit of a like a green colour, but I've got some brown and some orange mixed in to make the colour. So I'm absolutely not saying, like, you know, go buy a starter set and then never buy anything else. It's totally up to you, and it comes down to how much you're willing to spend. But so far, I'm 6 months in. I've just got my starter set with the 13 colours. It came with 2 metallics, which was good, a gold and a silver. And then, yeah, good, like, basic colours that you'll need. So brown, skin, like Caucasian skin tone, and whatnot. But every other colour that I've needed, I've just been able to mix up. And what I've actually found it's sort of been good with is, I don't know, if I had the actual other colours that I needed, it probably wouldn't make a difference. But it has really kept me focused on just using simple colours, which has meant like I found it just a bit easier to then highlight and shade, because like if you're sort of mixing up any kind of wacky colours, then you need to try and sort of recreate that. But yeah, so typically, like if a part of a mini's red, I just use the red. If a part of it's blue, I just use the blue, and then it's easy to then sort of highlight and shade from there, with just using a wash over the top. So it's not often that I mix up other colours, but just if you're wondering, if like this colour that I'm about to paint on is just one that I've mixed up because I haven't actually gone and bought any other paints. So if that's something that you're wondering whether you do need to buy a big range, I haven't needed to. I've just gotten away with my 13 colour starter set. I do have planned the next ones that I'm going to buy, because I'll be painting Arcadia Quest Inferno soon, and I need like an orange, which would be perfect for Josh, but I don't have it. There's a lava sort of triad with Reaper, and a few different things like that. But yeah, so as the need arises, I'll buy more. But for my first 6 months, with just sort of getting the fundamentals down, my starter set's been good, and I've just been able to mix up the odd colour here and there that I've needed to. I was saying just before about the amount of paints that I've had and that I've sort of gotten away with, just the ones that I've got. If you go down the road that I did where you get yourself a starter set, if it doesn't have an orange, do yourself a favour, go and buy an orange, because you're about to see, if you're like me and for whatever reason you can't mix orange, you're going to see sort of like how crap it can look. So yeah. So I've mixed up an orange for whatever reason. I just can't do it. Who knows? Maybe you might sort of look at it and think, no, that looks okay. But yeah, I don't know. I can't get a good orange going on. I don't know. I know red and yellow make orange, but I just, yeah, can't seem to get it quite right. So if you know more about it than what I do, and you can sort of have a look at it and give me any feedback on how I can get like a more solid orange. I find it either just goes to red or it goes to yellow, or if I actually get something that's kind of in between, it's just a bit of a weak orange. That'd be really, really appreciated. But yeah, seriously, do yourself a favor, just buy a good orange, and then you won't need to mix it up. I haven't had any trouble mixing any other colors, but orange, it just doesn't work. I just can't do it. there's a base coat done on Josh. Obviously, like I was saying earlier, with the orange, that was the most difficult part. Just took a few coats to get that right. Happy enough with it in the end, but yeah, I'll definitely be getting an orange, even if I wasn't going to be painting the Inferno game coming up. I'd definitely be getting an orange, because it's just to save me having to mix that one up, but it sort of does the job. So I'm just going to do a simple wash over Josh now. I'm going to use black on his shorts there, just because I've done that with, was it sort of Vance, bringing him in there, had similar colour, similar-ish coloured shorts there, that worked well on there, so I'll use a black on his shorts. And then I'm not sure with his shirt. I do have a yellow wash, or maybe a mix of that, and so I've got some of my Citadel washes. There's a Seraphim Sepia, I think it's called. Yep, Seraphim Sepia, and my yellow one. Cassandora yellow. Possibly just yellow. Might test on just a little spot, or maybe actually mixing the two together, seeing how that works. Mostly yellow, but just bringing it down a bit with the brown. Not sure with that yet, so I'll give that a go. But definitely black on his shorts. A little bit of Reichland Flesh Shade for the skin. And I might do a bit of a watered down sepia on his shoes, just so they're not quite so brightly white. They're definitely white in the picture, but yeah, just to dull them down a little bit, so you might have been walking through some dirt or something like that. But yeah, so that's the next step, and then that'll get a good dry before I come back to do any sort of highlighting and shading. So there we go, he's had a wash all over. I ended up just going with the sepia wash on his shirt. I tested it a bit on the back there, and I thought it still matched the colour pretty well, just sort of knocking it down a little bit, so that then when I bring it back up with some highlights, that colour there should be close enough that it should look right. And yeah, just that light sort of wash on his shoes there, so that they're still white, but they've just sort of been just dirtied up a little bit. And yeah, just the black on his shorts there just sort of gone nicely into those recesses to bring out the bit of detail there. And then yeah, I did the Caribou Crimson on his quiver, just to knock the red down, and then I'll just do a bit of a highlight, just with the straight red again, and then just feather those edges out, so that'll give a bit of extra shape to the quiver. So yeah, so that's where I'm going to leave Josh for the moment. He can have a good dry. I have mentioned this in a previous video, or at least a couple of them, I think, but when working with the washes, I've had a couple of times where I either did a wash over some paint before it was properly dry, or I've then done some painting back over a wash before it was properly dry, and either way, whether using a wash over paint that's not properly dry or painting over a wash that's not properly dry, it doesn't pan out. The paint just it just mixes in a funny way with the wash. When you're doing, like, say, a second base coat over a first coat, I found that first coat doesn't have to be perfectly dry for you to be able to paint back over with your next coat, because it's the same paint. Whereas because I think a wash or a shade, whatever you want to call it, and the actual acrylic paint, because they're two different things, if one of them is still a bit wet, they just mix in a funny way, gets all funny on the brush. So he's going to have a good dry. So he's totally dry before I come back to do any highlighting and finishing touches. So we'll leave it there, and then we'll come back to do the last couple of steps. Alright, so we're back after the washes that I put on in that last bit of the video has had a good time to dry. For you guys, it's been a few seconds, but I did that last night, now well into today. Seems to be about 45 or so minutes is enough time for washes to dry properly, for it to be long enough for you to go on and do any more painting over the top. But this is obviously sort of being the next day, more than enough time, so he's all dry. So I'm going to go into doing some highlighting now. You might also notice I've taken just quickly the tape off the base that I used just to cover it up while I was painting his shoes. I just wanted to check to see if there was any spots that I didn't actually get to because of the tape. As you can see that there is, so I'll be going back and touching them up at some point. But yeah, so going to get into doing some highlighting. Just a super fast background into how I've highlighted in the past to sort of get me to where I'm at the moment. When I first started with the first couple of games that I had, the first one was Pandemic Reign of Cthulhu. Before I had any washes, I just wet blended in the highlighting and the shading. So basically did the base coat, and then while it was still wet, pretty well just blended in white or black depending on whether I was going for a highlight or a shadow. I guess did the job at the point, being my first couple of minis, and wasn't bad to actually practice some wet blending, but got sort of inconsistent results. There are certain spots where I'm happy with how it looks, other spots where I'd love to go back and fix it up, but I'm not going to, because it's a way of sort of showing that progression. So that was sort of where I started. So yeah, just those high and low spots, just literally blending in white or black, while the base coat was still wet. Worked okay for things like robes or cloaks, where you sort of have those where the folds in the fabric aren't too sharp. But if you got down to finer details, if there were like finer folds in clothes, it didn't work as well for that. So then I got my my set of shades, just Citadel washes. You see heaps of people using them, just ones like these. And they obviously helped a lot. Even just using them on their own gives a bit of definition. I mean, you can see there's only shades on Josh so far. I've done no actual like highlighting or shading, just purely the washes over the top. And then I would sort of lighten off the base coat, hit the highlights, or darken off the base coat to do any shading. And where that sort of went wrong was that it was just too much of a transition between so we're now kind of considering how this is looking to be the base coat now, and there was just too much of a difference between how the highlight looked and what is sort of now considered the base coat, doing that in air quotes. So then what I moved to, which is sort of what I'm doing at the moment, is after I've done the shade, the first highlighting that I do is just going back to what the original base coat was. So if I'm going to be doing the shirt, and basically anywhere that the shade hasn't settled, I'm just going to repaint the base coat. So sort of thinking like along these points here on his shirt, you can see that the wash hasn't settled there. So that's a sort of a bit of a guide for where the light would be hitting. So I'm just going to reapply the base coat to those spots, and that really just sort of straight off the bat looks right because it's bringing it back to the color that it should be. So do that everywhere basically that the shade hasn't settled, even some spots where, you know, like along here I've got some shade there, but you know, you can imagine some light would be hitting there, so that's going to be sort of brought back up as well. And then for where the most concentrated part of the light hitting is going to be, then lighten the base coat off and just do them. So where that really fine ridge in the clothing is there, you'll get a really fine highlight across the top that'll be the base coat lightened up. But what I've also started to do with my last couple of minis, I think I did it with Will and Trevor and Hazel, is sort of feathering out my highlighting for those more broad surfaces. So like along this spot here, for example, where you can imagine so you can see a natural shadow from the actual light I've got up in under there, but here where some light would be hitting, because there's no actual like folds or creases in the clothes, it's quite a flat surface, but there's still going to be some light. What I'll be doing is putting the base coat down sort of in this corner where the majority of the light's going to hit, and then I follow a really bad way of doing this, then just sort of licking the brush, knocking most of the paint off, wetting the bristles a bit, and then just feathering out the edge. And because I'm just reusing the base coat, it then naturally sort of, I mean, you know, there's obviously technique to it and a bit of care, but as you then just blend that out almost to nothing, it then just has that, if done properly, it then has that good transition back into the shade there. So for the broader surfaces, like on top of his shoulders, these sorts of sections, even on his shorts, like across the top there where there aren't those folds in the clothes, that's what I'll be doing. So just putting the base coat down and then just feathering it out. But in spots on his shorts here, you can see that there are a couple of folds in there. It doesn't work for those finer creases, so that'll just be just the base coat straight along there, no blending at all, and then where the light will be hitting, where the highest concentration of light, get it right eventually, will hit, then lighten it off. So that's obviously a few minutes of explaining that, because I'm going to try and do this without actually stopping, so that you can sort of see the whole thing. But that's the point that I'm at with my highlighting. So yeah, even with the skin here, because there's no like folds in the skin, it'll be just the base coat skin on the top, and then for me licking the brush, you could just wash it off with water, then just feathering those edges out until it goes down to nothing, just for where the light's going to be hitting. So yeah, so that's going to be my approach. So hopefully I'll be able to get through to the end of my highlighting before I actually stop again. So he'll hopefully be pretty well done by the time I check back in. But if there are other things that I think of along the way, I'll stop and mention that. One thing because I've just gone to look down at my paint, I haven't had any drying retarder in my paint so far. For Josh, it's just been water on the brush just to thin it out. I do have drying retarder in now, because I'm going to be actually doing that feathering out of the paint. I want it to stay wetter for longer so that I have that more workable time to feather it out. But also, it's a warm day today, and so I don't want my paint drying on me too fast. So yeah, using drying retarder at the moment, and that's what I've got, just the Reaper drying retarder. So yeah, so gonna get into some highlighting. So I've just sort of highlighted back up with the base coat there now, so that he's sort of at the point where anywhere the light's going to be touching, that base coat is back. So now what I'm going to do is lighten off the base coat just with a bit of white, just to just to lighten it off a bit, and then I'll start to highlight less and less until I get to the point where I'm only highlighting the spots where the most, the highest concentration of light is going to be. So as you saw, as I was putting the paint across the top of his back there, then blending it down, there'll still be some lighter paint going across the top, but it won't be blended as far. Then I'll lighten it off again, run across the top, again blend not as far. So every time it gets lightened off, it won't be blending as far down, just to get to the point where I'll only be putting paint across the top of his shoulders, for example, that's going to be at that highest level of colour. So that's just going to be the approach from here, and then I'll be repeating that for his shorts and skin and all that. So I've just gone back and touched up his shoes a bit there, and just reapplied the wash, just to dirty them up a little bit, just so the white's not quite so bright. But yeah, so apart from the blood effect, that's as much as I'm going to do with Josh. With a bigger, more detailed mini that was going to be sitting on the table for longer, I'd push the highlights a bit further, build the contrast a bit more, and just refine some of them a little bit. A couple of little spots that's in the shorts there, where I would sort of bring the folds down a little bit further as I was blending them back up. I didn't quite blend as smoothly as I could have, but I'm not going to worry about all those little details because it's just not worth it. But the back there, sort of pretty happy with how that's looking for the amount of effort that went into it. Didn't really do a great job of the quiver. Didn't sort of quite get the blend right there. It's not as smooth as I'd like it to be. But again, it's just not worth spending the time for. In the middle of the table, that'll be that contrast will be seen. But yeah, so that'll do. So yeah, so just going to do some blood effects now. Going straight off Josh's card, just because obviously using a bow and arrow, he's not really getting too up and close with the zombies. There's very little blood on him. There's a little bit sort of on his shoes, a little bit on his shorts, but that's sort of about it. I'm going to play it up just a little bit more, just so that, sort of thinking of like the Walking Dead sort of thing where, maybe he might have actually stabbed a couple of zombies with an arrow, or he's gone up and he's collected an arrow from a zombie. So I'm sort of going to paint this one as though this arrow's been used before. He's pulled it out of a zombie's head or something like that and reusing it, and maybe as he's sort of done that, a bit of blood splattered on him or something like that. So yeah, I'm just going to play that up a little bit more and add a little bit more than what's actually on the card, just to tell a little bit more of a story about what he might actually be doing. So yeah, so just going to do those blood effects, and then I'll probably just paint mix up a little bit more orange and just touch up around his feet, just to finish off the base. So there we go. As you would have seen, I ended up going over the whole base, just because I couldn't get that orange to match exactly. But because the base was already orange, and then I was just painting a different type of orange over the top, it's only going to need that one coat. So with that, I'm going to call Josh done, which is survivor number 7. So yeah, so they're just about all ready to take on the horde. So thanks very, very much for checking out another one of these videos. I really hope you've gotten something out of this video that you can take away and try in your own painting, or just at the very least, you've just enjoyed watching me painting. I really, really appreciate the time that you guys spend watching these videos. And as I said each time so far, please do leave a comment below, something that you've liked about the video, something that you think could be improved. I want these videos to be as good for you guys as possible, and I can't do that just from watching them myself. I need that feedback from you guys. So yeah, something that you like, something that you think could be improved, I'll do my best to work your feedback into my videos. So yeah, but really do appreciate the time that you guys spend watching these videos that I'm putting up. So yeah, so please do like and subscribe. Keep up to date with when these videos are coming out. And yeah, that's another Zombie 15 Survivor done. So this is Matt from the Plastic Canvas signing out. Happy painting, everyone. Cheers.